All right, welcome back to the Pure Playbook. I'm Dr. Dustin Bosson here with Dr. Nate Merhaut. Another great episode today. We are rolling through really the precedent of where the pure athlete came from. So we did allow us to reintroduce ourselves last week. This week's all going to be about the physical pillar of this, and we have 3 pillars. Physical's up today. Make sure you like and subscribe. Hit the notification button so you know as we're uploading more and more content. Follow us on social medias at The Pure Athlete, and you can also follow us personally. We've got a lot of content coming out. We've got a lot of great plans going forward. So this is all about making sure that student athletes and their parents have resources that they can trust, elite level healthcare services that for student athletes and their parents trying to keep up. And we're going to keep putting out more content as far as what we're doing here. So this week, physical pillar.
Yeah. So the physical pillar is pretty much the foundational pillar of the 3: physical, mental, and relationships. And a lot of that comes from just what we do every day as chiropractors and rehab specialists and injury specialists. The basic definition of the physical pillar is just exploring the importance of what the physical health and performance in student athletes itself. So we're going to go through what the physical pillar means to us, what that entails when you actually set foot in the door, which part of that is the pure athlete evaluation, where you get a little bit into detail on what that is in the pieces of that, and obviously have Sam's segment towards the end. So the physical pillar, why is it why is it the foundation?
Yeah, I mean, and they're pretty much in order, I think, of how we wanted them to lay out was physical, mental, relationships. And so the physical pillar, I said this the other day to a client who we were going through a pure athlete evaluation report with. And I literally told them, and I just put a reel on this too, like one of the things that people don't really explore enough of when it comes to injury prevention is structure.
Yeah.
So that was really the basis of, well, immediately physical. So from the basis of structure, then also looking into, okay, let's look at the rest of the physicality. How is the athlete built? How do they need to be built? What does injury prevention look like, knowing that ACLs are going up, Achilles injuries are up, labral injuries, rotator cuff. So all of that can be encompassed in the physical. You can even talk about nutrition and, you know, as these student athletes are changing sports from basketball to football to soccer to whatever it might be, what physical levels, attributes aesthetically, strength-wise, nutrition-wise, all of that needs to change. So there's a lot in the one single word and pillar of physical. But at the heart of it for me, it was, how do we protect and build student athletes better? Immediately, the physical pillar. So it's a lot about injury prevention, a lot about longevity, a lot about recovery, and life after sport. At some point in time, whether you're 14 or 64, you know, athlete life ends. It doesn't change. It's still a part of who you are, but there is life after sport, and having that longevity of life, because you hear people all the time say what when they get older after they play sports. It's like, oh, my body's a wreck. It's like, oh, all those years I was so
aches and pains.
Yeah, it was so hard on my body. And it's like, let's change that. So injury prevention and longevity.
Yeah. So from that, basically with people saying, oh yeah, aches and pains and what they're dealing with later on because of the injuries they had early on, that's something we're in a sense trying to prevent with the training that they're supposed to be doing. And again, with every single athlete we see, everything we do is individualized, and especially from the physical component, because different body types, different body shapes, weights, heights, BMIs, all that kind
Chemistry.
of stuff, the sport that they're playing, the position they're playing, we break it down even to that. And so building strength, building power, mobility, flexibility, all of that's going to be different based on the joint, based on, you know, each individual athlete. Even if they're playing the same position, same sport, the structure could be different. So even if we're looking, let's just say, for example, hip structure, and your hip structure is going to determine how you are going to do a squat and be able to squat. And not everybody should squat the same way. And that's something I'm a little passionate about is educating people on proper technique and form based on what their body can do, because it should not look the same for everybody. And sometimes we're seeing injuries, overuse injuries, and things that shouldn't happen because someone told them they had to do it a certain way, and they did it a certain way because they were just following directions, and then it led to something down the road that was more of an injury that could have been prevented if someone knew or was educated on, well, why should this person do it differently than this person? And from that comes down to a lot of what the structural component is.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of like spanning a bridge. Like when it comes to structure, it's like you use different styles of bridges and engineering for different kinds of spans. And so when you're looking at a person, we look at it the same way. And however, it's like, this is how you squat. This is how your feet are splayed. This is how your knees look in the mirror, back straight. You look at all these things, but the thing that you're trying to span is totally different from the other thing standing next to it. So it really, again, structure. Why aren't we looking more at structure so we can, customize those things for sure?
Yeah. So then with the physical pillar, when people first come in the door, we kind of got a little bit ahead of ourselves on the recommendations.
Imagine that.
Yeah, recommendations. But let's draw back a little bit and say, so when people come in for the actual Pure Athlete evaluation, let's break that down, because each individual piece of it has a physical component, and just kind of explain what it is and what they're getting into when they come in for that evaluation.
Yeah, the Pure Athlete evaluation, one of the first things we do is the athlete history, consult, medical history, that kind of thing. After that, immediately, so really big step number one after that, we figure out who you are, what you're doing, what your goals are, is we take digital x-rays and we literally look at the structure. And we take a 4-view motion study of an area, maybe 2 areas, depending on the sport. Because I can tell you right now, if there's any sort of head and neck impact, like soccer, like football, hockey, you're getting a cervical motion study. It's like, what the heck's a motion study? Well, doing that evaluation, you'll find out what that is. But also lumbar motion study. Okay, how are hips, pelvis, lumbar spine? What's locked up? What's moving? What's not? But seeing the entire spine is just so crucial, because it's going to depend on that particular person's movement patterns and knowing what the structure looks like. And also just the injury prevention point of, it's hard to build a house on a faulty foundation, and nobody would want to do that. These are our kids. These are athletes we're talking about. Structure is so important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the foundation is through the structure, is through even your individual training. So sometimes we're literally breaking that athlete back down to reset some of the patterns that have been either compensations or faulty patterns, that whether they developed them over time or just the way that they learned originally. And so rebuilding that foundation, both from a structural standpoint as well as a strength, movement, and endurance, and a muscular and neuromuscular standpoint as well, is something that we do. And we see through the evaluation what's faulty within that structural component, whether it's the actual spine itself, structural issues there, or from the movement pattern issues from, we do the movement assessment, which is kind of the next step of the evaluation. So get a little bit into that on what we do and why we do it.
Yeah. So after we take the films, we take the x-rays, we come out into the lab area here essentially, and we hook technology up to each one of these athletes. This technology is what I like to call a 4D look into the athlete. I mean, we're looking at loads, and there's 2 that go in the lower limbs, there's 2 that go in the back. We've also are starting to create the upper extremity as well. We've launched that in the past week. But this technology, we're able to see what loads, what velocities, what speeds outside of that are even happening. And then also, as we're recording all of this and it links up, all of this data links up, we also have movement pattern lines, and we can literally see the biomechanics along with the data. The biggest thing that drew me to that when this was presented to me was, I am sick of having people I'm sick of having people have information thrown at them, and they don't know where to go and who to trust. They see, is this good? Is this influence good? Are they telling the truth? And it's like, look, please don't take my word for it. Let me just build the value in the evaluation that we're doing, that you can literally see on your athlete, instead of just scrolling some sort of page or some Google page and just blindly looking at it and not being able to see, well, I see how that could work, but I don't see that on my athlete. So we're bridging the gap of, here's the information, here's what the research is showing. Now you hook up to technology, and here we take the films. There's a 4D look. Here's the data on this particular athlete, whether you're a student athlete or you're a parent bringing a student athlete in on, I'll say, on your athlete. Because that's the biggest thing is solving people's problem is, how do I protect my kid better in a time like this where they're built so well and they're so strong and there's so much demand? The biggest problem is where do I go? Who do I trust? How do I protect them better? And this data will help you make the best decision possible, rather than just, I hope they don't get hurt today.
Right. A big thing with the individuality piece of it is, we get so many athletes that come in and they've been so many other places. And not to talk negatively on any of the other places they went to, but a lot of those other places are orthos, PTs, other chiropractors, massage therapists, personal trainers, athletic trainers. So we're all in it together. But what we're trying to solve for is, one, we want this literally to be the last stop where you don't have to go anywhere else, and you don't have to ask any more questions, because we're going to give you those answers. And the data that we pick up with the evaluation is so individualized. And yes, anybody can run the tests and get the data, but it's also how it's interpreted. And the way that we interpret that is very specific to each individual athlete, based on what their previous injuries are, based on what their sport is, and based on what their goals are. So all of that comes into play. And yes, we're getting tons of data, but the way that we're using that data is what's key in this evaluation.
And specificity. And that's one thing that I pride ourselves on is and also what makes us so different. Like you said, all those other places are great places to go, and they have great means to what they do, and great critical health care, and other great chiropractors that we even collaborate with, and PTs that we collaborate with, personal trainers that we collaborate with all of this data. But it's intention and specificity of, okay, literally the Pure Athlete is all about protecting and building student athletes better. So when you see us, when you see our content, when hopefully maybe one day you see us spread across even the US, you know that's what we're here to do. And it's that intention and specificity where I've referred to other chiropractors in Iowa, in Florida, that I know can do that component to it. There's just a whole nother 99% of what's going on here that we really want to focus on.
Right. Another thing I want to point out with the evaluation that we're assessing is what we call dynamic stability. And that's key, because you can test strength and muscle tests and do all that kind of stuff and say, yeah, you're strong there and you got that. But it's how you control your body through the movements that we're putting you in. And yes, we're in a lab doing these movements. So we also take that into consideration, because if we see certain faulty movement patterns or weaknesses here, or lack of dynamic stability in certain joints, or lack of mobility or other things that we're looking for, if we see it in the lab, what's happening actually in practice or on the field,
right?
Because the forces are so much greater, and we can measure the forces in the lab here and do that kind of stuff. But just correlating to what we get from a data standpoint and saying, look, if we're getting this in here, just imagine what's happening out there.
It's like, what's the unconscious subconscious look like as you're making those movements? Like, ooh, they have ball, I want ball, and you just go. It's like, absolutely. And the dynamic, like that's where you want to talk about dynamic stability and all of these movement things and patterns and FMS and all. You really want to take a deep dive. This guy right here is who you talk to for that. I mean, this is it, but it is very, very important because of exactly what you said. At some point in time, competitive nature takes over, and we want to make sure that student athlete is built to prevent at all possible an injury that had to do with the dynamic stability, for sure.
Then the last piece of the evaluation that we have added and gotten into is our baseline concussion screening, which part of that is kind of physical. There's some neurologic pieces to that. There's also a mental component, how the brain works and memory and all that as well. So that kind of bleeds a little bit over into the mental component of things, especially with concussion. But one thing I know that you really like to point out and that you're also passionate about is, go ahead and touch a little bit, because I won't steal your thunder, on when there's a concussion that's sustained, how does that apply to also the physical nature of sustaining other injuries?
Yeah. I mean, sustaining a concussion increases a lot of susceptibility to other injuries, but even most importantly, cognitively, who you are. So that's the biggest injury you're going to sustain. And a lot of people don't know how to communicate that, or a lot of student athletes don't know how to communicate that, don't know what to expect, don't know what to see. But then on the back end too, is it's like, if we can get you treatment, or there's things that we can do here, and we've referred to a specialist here. But at the end of the day, it's like, leave no stone unturned when something like that happens, because it's going to affect coordination. It's going to affect balance. It's going to affect cognitive perception. It's going to affect a lot of those things that we want to leave without a shadow of a doubt on the bench and not bring back on the field. So having a baseline is super important, because the last thing you want to do is be like, well, it looks like they were back to what they were before, but we don't have I wish I would have known. And
Yeah.
it's like, that's the last thing we want anybody to say is, I wish I would have known, or I wish we would have had something sooner. Because how many people our age, and it's something else we posted already, is it's like all of these parents are like, man, I wish I had this when I was a kid. So when it comes to concussion too, it's such a big deal, but it's also to the effect of, we know what happens with concussions long term now. We've seen some of the sad stories. We've seen, and eventually these student athletes are parents.
Right.
And so cognitively, it's important to know, who are we, where have we been, what's been sustained, and what was the baseline, so we can get back to that, if not better, going forward.
Right. I'm going to go off a little tangent because I am passionate also about concussions. And this was a conversation that was brought up early in the office today, where are we getting better with diagnosing concussions and pulling them out when it's necessary, and going through protocols? Because from what the NFL showed this year, there were less concussions. But I've watched a couple games and seen certain plays that I was like, okay, why didn't they get pulled, and why weren't they assessed? Because they got their bell rung. And so we're having this in place because, one, yes, we need the baseline, just like what you described. But two, just educating the parents more on, one, you don't have to have a blow to the head to sustain a concussion. There's a whiplash component to most of these injuries too. So that's also where the structural films come into play. So what does the cervical spine look like after a whiplash injury? And we have a perfect example of that, of taking x-rays, and literally the day of x-rays, a couple hours later, they got into a car accident, whiplash. We were able to retake them, I think 2 or 3 days later, and literally seeing the changes on that and how we, create a treatment plan and go about treating it from that perspective as well. But literally almost having those checkups, which we have within the evaluation, within the plans that we're recommending, is we have those checkpoints throughout seeing an athlete, and we're constantly checking and updating. And if there's something that we're suspecting, especially with like a NFL or a lineman, is what I'm getting at, is they're constantly hitting heads and having that repetitive blow to the head, for lack of better terms.
Linemen, hockey players. A lot of that repetitive motion. And you can also think, what about these gymnasts? A lot of flips, because the thing is, and this could be a whole nother podcast. I can see us really diving down here right now currently, but the coup and counter coup is what happens. The coup, you go forward, brain goes back. The counter coup is head goes back, brain goes forward, and wham. So think about the flips, think about the tumbles, think about the repetitive hits into the glass, or, the lineman, like you're saying, or the wide receivers going over the middle, where, again, they get a good hit. They get hit in the chest going across the middle, and you see their head go like this, let alone slap off the ground afterwards. It's like, there's a lot to go on there. But, to your point too, that one of the things that, the other things that I am passionate about is, like, you have to look at that upper cervical space. And because of this evaluation, because of the foundation that we take on, and it's not just a foundational concussion screening, like we say foundational, as far as you walked in here day 0, that is a foundation point where all of this is done. The evaluation itself is not foundational. It is extensive, so that we know everything, because there's some evaluations that maybe some schools do, they're required to do, that are very foundational, and they get what they need to get, not all that they should get.
Right. One thing I think maybe in the next 5 or 10 years that you're going to start seeing with concussion and what the guidelines are, is they will start to actually have set assessments, whether you've had one or not. It'll just be like a routine check, where maybe it's every 4 or 5 games, you get a routine check to see where you are. How close are you to that baseline? Are you way off? Do we need to, not practice in pads anymore for a week or 2? Like, what do we need to do? And I think that's really going to help with the longevity, the life after sport, which is really big with the concussions. But I'll digress, because we can go on and on and on with this. But literally getting back to what we were talking about with the physical pillar and what it means in the evaluation. But that kind of encompasses what the evaluation is, what we do with it, and how we use that data to basically build and protect the student athlete.
And wrapping that up, let me just summarize this. If you've made it this far, I'm going to summarize this and try to bring this home. Is we are solving for you the questions that we have asked, that you all have answered in our community. So whether it's here, whether it's Tampa, whether it's Pittsburgh, whether it's LA, we have enough data that you guys are all asking the same questions. How do I protect them better? What can I do? Where do I go? Who can I trust? What's their nutrition need to look like? And how can they recover? Injury prevention, performance, and recovery, period. That's what you're asking. And this evaluation is solving that for you so you can literally see it and not guess.
Mm-hmm.
And you have that data as they grow up. Heaven forbid they have an injury. As they continue to grow, you have this data that you can literally see with your own two eyes.
I'll get a little nerdy on you too with that, because there's research now that shows that practitioners in general do not see what they actually think they're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So you could run someone through an assessment and just say, hey, I want you to squat and watch you and say, oh, it looks like your knee's doing this. But until you put the data in the sensors and actually record video and slow it down and do that, you really can't see it. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing so much more now with what we're doing in the evaluation than we could. And I used to practice the way where it was like just a visual thing, and you would see kind of what you would see. And sometimes you'd be right, sometimes you'd be wrong. But now it's like we know, and we have clear-cut answers on what to do because of what we're seeing.
Yeah.
So let's see what Sam has for us today.
I could listen to you guys talk forever. No, that I truly, you guys listen to them. Like, they are so smart. They know exactly what they're doing. So take them up on this Pure Athlete evaluation because it's so important. Speaking of important things that have happened in the past 24 hours, 48 hours, the Super Bowl happened this weekend. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Nate, I'm going to say this on air for everyone. You were right.
100%.
I don't say that lightly as a Chiefs fan. So congratulations, you were right. But I don't want to dwell on their loss. I do want to talk about everyone's favorite Super Bowl commercial, because I know that we talked about that last week. And then what was your favorite part of the game?
My mind first went to the Case of the Mondays. Was that Coors Light?
Yes, it was.
Okay, I thought that one was good. There were a lot of good ones, but for some reason that one popped in my mind when you asked the question.
This is how I can prove I'm literally not an entertainment buff. I don't even know if I can remember one of the commercials. Like Dr. Nate said, he was looking forward to the Doritos commercial.
Oh, it was awful.
It was not good.
I got to the end of the game and I was like,
it was early on.
Yeah.
Was it?
It was like one of the first ones to come on.
I don't remember.
He was a little alien guy. And
I think the only thing I even remember about a commercial is Erica said something about seal, and she was trying to describe it to me.
Yeah, that was funny. Good. The Mountain Dew commercial.
I remember, was it some Lilo and Stitch or something?
Okay.
And the only reason I knew that is because Cammie goes, Daddy, look. And I looked, and it was that little blue cat looking guy that was running around the field.
Stitch.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Blue cat.
Honestly, I don't even know if I remember any of them.
Yeah.
My favorite.
You like that too.
That was a good one. My favorite was the Bud Light commercial with wasn't it Post Malone and Peyton Manning?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
and,
that was
it. I'm starting to recall. But
where they were pretending to be dads.
Yeah,
in the neighborhood.
My smoker cuts grass.
I
need a smoker that cuts grass.
Yes.
I was waiting for the part because I think they did another commercial together and they didn't have that piece in there where they're like, you can't drink a beer on a beer commercial, right?
Yes.
And they're like, and that wasn't the commercial. So I remember a little bit of that.
Shane Gillis is the comedian that is in that. I love him. He's great.
I will say overall they were better this year from years that I remember that I was just like, man, I'm disappointed. But there were some good ones.
Not where we were, not where we want to be, not where we're going to be, but kudos compared to last year.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was there a Clydesdale commercial?
There was. It was really cute. It was
cut short. So my mother-in-law, she apparently watched all of them before even the Super Bowl, because you can go on YouTube and watch all of them and cheat that way. And she watched the Clydesdale one, and she's like, oh, man, they cut it short. And I went back, watched on YouTube, and they did cut it short.
Did they?
So I think a lot of those, they trim and cut short, or if they re-air them, it's like a shortened version of it too. But
okay. Favorite part of the game?
Honestly,
favorite part.
I have a favorite part.
That's tough.
Go ahead, you go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Cooper DeJean getting that pick six. on his birthday.
Great number, Cooper DeJean. Shout out Cooper DeJean.
That was probably the best play of the game.
It was, for sure.
Yeah. I think my favorite part, because again, I was way wrong, had it way backwards. That's what I wanted to happen. That's definitely not what happened. Dr. Nate drilled it, because I had also said on this last podcast, like, I've just seen it too many times, kind of like Lamar Jackson. And you can go back to the last podcast we did, and I'm just afraid. And Jalen Hurts threw that interception, and I was like, here we go. They hadn't had any turnovers, I think, in like 9 games or something like that. I mean, both of these teams, they don't turn the ball over much. And finally the Eagles stopped turning the ball over. But then I'm like, oh, here we go. And so I think my favorite thing of all of that is he didn't let that crash him. Worthy had a great game for a young kid to start a game like that, and then to end a game like that. That could be very scary for a lot of people trying to guard him. And if they control him, this is where the mental pillar comes in. If they can really hone him in and be like, look, build on this now, like use that as fuel. So that was that final play, and watching him, perfect ball thrown, like that was good. But I don't know about a favorite. I'm just more of a broad like scenario. I think the coolest thing for me was to see Jalen Hurts give it up, get it back, and just keep rolling.
Yeah, I actually thought about you because of what you said about that interception. And when that happened, I wasn't like, oh man, like I thought it was going to be okay. And because of the momentum they already had and how they were playing, and then also just how the Eagles defensive line was just crushing it through the whole game. Like they were getting at it at all angles. And that, I think that's really what won the game for them, is just their defensive line.
And to quickly go off on a rant, again, the mental pillar of this is perspective. So as I'm going to tie this back in real quick to the pure athlete and this particular question, and this is what I want all parents to think about, what we need to think more about, what student athletes need to think about, is how many people have walked in here this week and they didn't even show up. Like the Chiefs just laid down. It's like they got beat. Like,
yeah,
Mahomes had less than 2 seconds to throw the ball at any one time. They didn't even blitz until the end of the game.
Right.
Like they flat got beat. Look at what they did to Saquon.
They stopped him.
Did they even have 100 yards? Did he even have 100 yards? Like I was hoping Saquon, like I was hoping the Chiefs would win and Saquon go off for 200 plus, and that would have been cool. But they shut him down. It's like McDuffie, that unfortunate call, like that kind of went both ways. But all in all, like they just got beat. And it could be scary too, because now there's 2 options. Are they going to freak out and go into rebuild mode and totally revamp? Or the Eagles poked holes in all of the bucket and they know all of the holes in all of the bucket, and now they get to rebuild, and now they get to fix those instead of rebuild.
Right.
So don't think about, oh man. And also don't let it affect your day. Like how we are so passionate as athlete or as sports followers, all of us who follow sports. And then we build this identity of like, that is our team, that is our life, and it affects us the next day. And I made a post on this that day. Is like, look, like do not rub it in people's face. Like, don't be an ass about it. But also too, don't play the victim, and don't let the Chiefs losing, if that was your team, ruin your day and change how you show up for people. And that's the same thing we can take to as you walk off the court in a bad beat or an upset in a district game or whatever it is in high school or in club soccer or in club anything. It's like, you're going to get beat. Nobody in their career is undefeated. Nobody.
Right.
And so you never know who's watching. And it also, don't let one mistake, one bad attitude define the reputation you've built. Act out and then have it kill everything that you're built. And immediately there's perspective of who you are. And I've done it. I mean, and that's why I'm so passionate about it, is because if I knew what I knew now earlier, I wasn't disrespectful by any means, but I was very intense and very, high expectations and wanted to win. And it's just like, your perception can change in a heartbeat exactly in those scenarios. I don't care if you're a parent going to work or a student athlete walking off the field. It matters.
Yeah. Good perspective.
Sweet.
Let's wrap it up.
All right. Well, Next episode is going to be more on that mental pillar, which is going to be super fun. I think there's a lot to unpack here, so stay tuned for that. You guys are going to want to tune into that because one of my favorite words in life is perspective. And with everything that we've gone through and know, we want to give the cheat sheet because you can be jaded in the life that we lead and our kid on the field and the kid that is on the field. I mean, there's just so much there that we paid the dummy tax. I paid the dummy tax. Let me just give perspective on it. Take it with a grain of salt. So that's coming next week. Make sure you, like I said, like and subscribe. Follow us. Subscribe to us on YouTube as we continue to pour more information out. We're going to be doing webinars, put some webinars, more content where we're going to literally deep dive into some of these topics. 15-minute webinars, 20-minute webinars where we're even going to bring some research and some practical things and some tangible things that you can do or look for at home or with your student athlete, and just more content going forward. So hope you guys have a great rest of your week. We'll see you soon. See ya.